Freedom versus liberty. What's the difference? A conversation with Christopher Nesbitt of Citizens Academy US. That is our topic for today. Welcome to the Lawyers and Mediators International Show and Podcast, where we discuss law and conflict resolution topics to educate both professionals and everyday people. Catch regular episodes on YouTube and anywhere you get your podcasts. Just remember, nothing in these episodes constitutes legal advice, so be sure to talk to a lawyer, as cases are fact-dependent. Hey everyone, this is Mac Pierre-Louis, attorney, mediator, arbitrator, working throughout Florida and Texas. And I am here today with a special guest who's going to be talking to us about Citizens Academy US. And that is Christopher Nesbitt. He's the national spokesperson of Citizens Academy. And welcome to the show, Christopher.
Thank you so much, Mac. I'm very glad to be here. I'm just delighted.
Yes, thank you so much for coming on. And today we get to talk a little bit about history and the Constitution of the United States and what your organization is passionate about, which is educating the public about the foundations and the root of the U.S. Constitution and what it means and how it can promote liberty in people's lives and in this country. And so before we get started, so this is going to be very educational, and if there's history nerds out there, they may find this intriguing. Before we get started, I wanted to just let you introduce yourself just a little bit so that people can know who we're talking to, and then I will screen share just while you're talking to show your website. If you're listening to this podcast, make sure that you check out the YouTube video, but you can go to the what I'm screen sharing at citizensacademy.us. That's the website. All right, Christopher, tell us about yourself and then let's and the organization that you represent.
Okay. Well, I am a passionate educator. No matter what line of work I've been in, I always consider myself first and foremost an educator. With the Citizens Academy US, I am very happy to say that we are a team that has a very specific goal, which is this: hundreds of millions of people throughout America that have gained a complete understanding of the preamble of the U.S. Constitution. And that is what everybody in our team has and is focused on as our goal. And the way we achieve this is through the guide, which is called the Guide to Complete Understanding of the Preamble of the U.S. Constitution.
Yes, and I am showcasing the guide on the screen share, so we'll go through some of it and just have you expound on it. But first, what is the Citizens Academy US?
Well, what it is, it's a team of people that have created this guide and are working to have people go through the guide in a very specific way, which is covered on page 13. And Mac, you and I touched on that in our conversation before we did this recording. So there's a series of steps so people can actually learn every important word in the preamble of the U.S. Constitution. And these definitions for the guide are from the Noah Webster's 1828 edition of the American Dictionary of the English Language, which I actually have a copy of right here. So this is quite an extensive book, but the definitions in the guide that you're showing your guests now all are based on that dictionary made by Noah Webster, spending 26 years of his life full-time compiling 70,000 words.
Yes, and so when we were first talking, it seemed very important to you that definitions matter, right? That if people don't agree on what terms mean, they may not have a full understanding of where something comes from. And so that's important to me. You know, I deal with the law and conflict resolution all the time. And one of the things that's pertinent is that people get on the same page about what it is that they're talking about. And I think a lot of confusion and disagreement oftentimes stems from people starting from very different places and not agreeing on keywords. If you don't agree on the terms, then it's going to be very difficult to uh, reach any kind of foundation that's going to then lead to a conclusion that might create you know people being able to hear each other and understand each other and come into some kind of agreement. So what do you say about these words? Why is the preamble so important to the Constitution?
Well, what I'd like to say first is what you just described is exactly what I think and how I think. When I see people arguing, my thought process is they're not clear on the definitions of the words they're using to argue about.
Mhm.
I've seen arguments go on seemingly endlessly and they don't resolve. But when definitions are cleared up and the meanings are actually understood and agreed on, then solutions occur instead of problems or arguments. So
Mhm.
what you just said is just like, it so resonates with me. I love it. And so with the preamble, what often is found is that people do not know that there are six purposes to the US Constitution, and they're all covered in this one sentence that is the preamble. Now, a person may have learned how to recite this preamble,
Yeah.
and one of the steps of the guide is to actually read this preamble. But then when they go through the guide and clear up the definitions and then read it again, it's a whole new preamble.
Yeah, well, let's read it real quick, and then we'll talk about the why we titled today's discussion as freedom versus liberty, because that's one of the keys that goes a long way towards helping understand some of the intention behind the rest of the Constitution. Okay, so basically, we all learned this in school, right? I grew up in the U.S. Most of my life, and it says, "We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish the Constitution for the United States of America." And that's just the beginning. And then the rest of the story is a Constitution that has been amended over time. And so, what are the key terms that you want people to focus on before we get to the crux of freedom versus liberty?
Well, I would say the main thing is that there's no real key terms we need to look at other than let's look at the definition of preamble,
Hmm.
because one thing I would like to mention is that over 500 people have been interviewed on what do the definitions of the preamble mean. And on average, 19 of the words the person being interviewed either didn't have a complete understanding of or had a wrong meaning for it. 19, and there's 52 words in the preamble, but to have 19 of them misunderstood is quite an amazing statistic.
Yeah,
So let's go back one page.
sure.
And yeah, right there. So Mac, would you mind reading this page to us?
Sure. Preamble, the introductory part of a law which states the reasons for and the intent of the law. The preamble sets forth the guiding principles which are intended by the law. A preamble provides a foundation for the document that follows and prepares the minds of the reader for what comes next. Prepares means to make ready. The word preamble meant, quote, to walk before, from the Latin words pre, which meant before, and ambulare, which meant to walk. The preamble of the Constitution clearly states its six purposes.
Great. So how was that?
Well, no, I mean, I never had to think about the word preamble before until today. Actually, it was something we just took for granted, but I understand that the intention is it sets forth the purposes for why the rest of the Constitution exists.
Great. That's great. Now, one thing that I would like to mention is that this guide is something that you do. People have a tendency when they get a book is just to read it. But the
Yeah.
reason we call this a guide is that it is something that you do. And the page 13 which we don't need to turn to, but it covers the steps of reading the definition and then thinking of examples and sentences. So if it's okay with you, I would like to take you through that action step so you can see how it works to bring the word to life
Sure.
and demonstrate that to your listeners. Would that be okay with you?
Sure. Go ahead.
Great. So this definition that you read, a preamble, can you tell me in your own words what that means?
So, preamble, in my own words, is something that comes before something else, and that um, explains what that something else is going to be about.
Great. And what does it do to the mind of the reader? Does it prepare or set them up for what comes next?
Correct. It does.
Great. Now, can you use preamble in a sentence?
So, well, I'll kind of cheat here. The preamble, the preamble to the U.S. Constitution says what the Constitution is about.
That's great. Now, I want to mention also is that if you're not used to using words in sentences, it's almost like starting to work out if you haven't worked out for a while. And it's like,
Like a
whoa,
muscle. Mhm.
yes. So there's like the mental muscles of your mind can get exercised by doing this. But if it's all right with you, let's do a couple of more, either an
Sure.
example, and I could tell you one too. So
Go ahead.
let's go do like this is often done with a learning partner. So if you and I were both going through the guide, which I would love to take you through at a later time,
Mhm.
but I might think of an example, you might think of an example, but I did think of one example. Let's say a lady has her husband come home from work and she wants to tell him the news that she's pregnant.
Okay.
And he's sitting down to dinner and she thinks, well, it probably would be best to prepare his mind and ask him how his day was and see if there was any problems going on at work and that she has something important to say. Would it be all right if we talked about that? That would be a preamble to this announcement that she's expecting.
Yes.
Rather than without a preamble, he might be taking his first bite of steak and she says, oh, by the way, I'm pregnant. That might
Yeah.
not go over as well as if she prepared his mind with that preamble.
It's a setup, basically. She's setting him up for the news. Okay.
That's right. So, can you think of an example of a situation where a preamble might be needed in life?
Oh, similarly, if I guess if I have somebody in my life who is wanting to borrow some money, they might start by buttering me up a little bit and making sure that I guess checking up on me to make sure that I'm um, not facing any kind of financial difficulties, and they may ask certain questions to just kind of lay the foundation. That's the idea that comes to mind because it's happened.
That's very good. Now, let's do one more sentence for preamble, and then we'll go on to the next step.
Okay, so from me,
Yes, for you.
um, um, the preamble. You want the example, or you want me to just define the
Yeah,
word?
I'd like you to, well, you can think of an example, but put it into a sentence like the preamble was needed because, and then you
Okay,
can fill in
okay,
the blank.
yeah. The preamble was needed so that the person who was going to be asked for money could be, um, you know, I guess, made comfortable before they were asked.
Great. That's a very good sentence. Now, do you feel with what we've done that this word now is more clear, more alive,
Yeah,
and you
I
might be able
understand.
to?
Yeah, I've had to think about it and process the word.
Yes. Now, as we progress, there is one other word I'd like to show our guests before we jump
Sure.
into freedom and liberty. But if
Okay.
you can go forward, we can see that the next word is we, and we can assume that people will know this word,
Yeah.
right? You together with the other people you're talking about, all of you. But let's now go on to the people, because the three words we the people are used a lot in
Yes.
conversations and videos, but I can tell you these two pages are often eye opening for people. So would you mind reading this page to us?
Sure. At the time the preamble was written, all countries in the world were ruled by monarchs, single rulers, one person in charge, which were either a king, a queen, emperor, or empress. These monarchs were surrounded by people of the quote upper class who were known as aristocrats or nobles. This was a small group. The rest of the population that had no authority and was ruled by these monarchs and aristocrats or nobles was called the commoners or the people. The term the people meant the ordinary persons in a community or nation who did not have any significant social status and who were not members of royalty, nobility, nor any part of the aristocracy.
Right.
Mhm.
And now let's go on to the next page.
Okay. Oh,
Let's read.
the
Go
people,
ahead.
the words the people in the preamble signify that this document was coming from the people directly, straight from the common, ordinary people, not from or through the rulers, the aristocracy, nor any government officials. Additionally, when you say the people, it's different than if you just say people. When you put the word the in front and say the people, it means all the people or most of the people in complete agreement, speaking as one voice. The people did not agree with the king's decision and united in protest. The people want you to be in charge. The 99% approval vote showed the people want a new library in town. Okay.
That's great. How do you like that?
Yeah, it makes me think about the electoral college in a way, because people would automatically bring that up and whether or not it's legit not to have the people, the actual people, be the ones who elect a president versus the electoral college. But that's a whole other conversation. That's what it makes me think about, that the power needs to derive from the people. And I hear the phrase "the consent of the governed" a lot. In my poli sci days, that the power needs to come from the people, not from the top down, but from the bottom up. So yeah, it's very important to me, especially with my own story.
That's great. I'm
Mhm.
great. I'm glad that you see that and that you see its importance. It's
Yeah.
important to me also. I really get chills just listening to you read it because in the times where this Constitution was written, a lot of the people were never given importance, never given the
Mhm.
power, and that this document can give the people the power and can this first sentence can help them understand six purposes, I think is amazing. So I'll
Yeah.
give a sentence for the people,
Sure.
and it's simply the people in the country, this country, are important.
Okay.
Can you give me a sentence for the people that shows this understanding?
Yes. The people, the power derives from the people, who then empower the government.
Great. That's great. And one thing I would like to mention is that I want to give credit to the American best-selling author L. Ron Hubbard, who said that complete understanding depends on a freedom from misunderstood words. And that is one of the basis of the inspiration that made this guide possible.
Mhm.
So I like how that we're able to do this on the air. And
Yeah.
if it's okay with you, we can now go forward to freedom and liberty and
Sure.
satisfy the listeners that are on this podcast wanting to know, well, is there a difference? We can now clear that up.
Yeah. So tell me, is there a difference? Because in most people's heads, I would imagine there isn't, because you hear these words spoken very loosely. But I think the other day you made the point, that it's the Liberty Bell, it's the Statue of Liberty, and the more people think about, okay, well, why is the word liberty used so much, and why is it specifically in the preamble? Um, just to remind people, when I go back to the definition, it specifically says it specifically says provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty. Secure the blessings of liberty, not the blessings of freedom. So
But
tell us why the difference.
Great. Well, why the difference is this exact point goes right back to how we started. And you made the point that people argue there's trouble and problems when definitions are not understood. So a person that thinks liberty and freedom are synonymous, now you'll find, in my experience, argumentation happening, problems happening. But when those definitions are cleared up so they can differentiate the two and see the difference between freedom and liberty, now we have more harmony, more agreement, less upset, less fighting, less
Mhm.
arguments, more solutions, more agreement.
Yeah.
And so that's why there's a difference. And now, yes, what you said is right. There's the Statue of Liberty, the Liberty Bell, the give me liberty or give me death. It's not give
Hmm.
me freedom or give me death. Now, why that is, we'll see when we go to those definitions, which
Okay.
are later on in the book. But if you page
Yeah.
through it
What page?
rapidly, we'll
What
get
page
to
is that?
yeah.
What page is that?
I'm sorry.
What page would you want me to go to?
Yeah, it's I will get it for you here. Just one moment. It is approximately page
I do have definition of liberty in 66.
right. So, and then if you go back about 3 pages, maybe 62. Yeah, go back.
Okay.
Right,
Freedom.
right. So, would you like me to read this one?
Sure. Go ahead.
Freedom is absence of all restraint and all restrictions. The word freedom comes from frio, which meant acting of one's own will. The animals in the forest enjoyed their freedom.
Okay.
So, there would be no restraints or restrictions if one had freedom.
The freedom to do anything you want, basically, but then that
That's
can produce chaos.
okay. Now I understand that.
Mhm.
So can you give me in your own words?
Mhm.
Let's go back 1 page, please.
Yeah.
Let's do this exercise on freedom. Can you tell me in your own words what this definition means to you?
Sure. Freedom means to not have any restraint over over your head and the ability to do what you want. You're free to do
Great.
what you want.
That's right. Now let me give you a sentence and then you give me a sentence, all right?
Sure.
So the person had so much attention on having freedom that he never understood there might be a need for certain restraints or restrictions in order to survive with others.
Okay.
He didn't want to have any rules, and that was how he looked at freedom.
Okay.
All right,
When
can you
you get your driver's license, you are free to drive anywhere you want.
that's good. That's
Okay.
good. Can you give me another sentence for freedom?
Uh, People from their human heart want freedom and not to be oppressed by others.
That's right. That's exactly good. So now, how does that much seem to you?
So far, so good. I get it. It's basically there's an absence. People desire an absence of authority over them, so they can do their own free thing. And we have the concept theologically of free will, so that people do not feel that they are, required or bound by any kind of rules over their heads, to do something, and they are free to do it. So I get it. It's one of those words that you end up using the word to define the word. It's kind of circular in a way, but
That's okay. Do you feel like it's come alive and you have a good
yes,
understanding of it?
I
Good.
understand
Now
it.
let's go on to the next page.
Okay.
Now, Liberty has 2 pages, but this first one, would you read this to me?
Sure. Liberty, the state of being free from oppressive restrictions from government on one's way of life, behavior, belief, or political views. Oppressive rulers or regulations would be ones that are too severe, cruel, harsh, or that limit or restrict you too much. Continue.
Mm-hmm.
Liberty assumes restraints are essential. Control that you do agree with, that you consider reasonable, that you consent to. The word liberty came from the word liber, which meant free. The people enjoyed the liberty after escaping the cruel king. America is often called the land of liberty. Okay.
Beautiful. Now, notice in this illustration that shows the crosswalk and the guard helping stop the traffic so the children can safely cross the street. Now, in that example, there's a law in the rules of the road that you stop when there's children in the crosswalk and you don't just keep driving.
Yeah.
Now, that's a rule that I find people agree with.
Yeah, I think so.
And now we have liberty has that restraint that is agreed upon. And now people are happy and not worried that children are going to be run over.
Yeah. You're not free to run kids down because the liberty comes with that restriction that you agree to. Again,
Exactly.
it's consent but that power comes from the person, who subjects themselves under it. Okay, understood.
Great. I would like to say at this point that over 500 people were checked on
Mhm.
if they understood the difference between freedom and liberty. And only one out of the 500 actually knew the difference that we're learning now. And I think that's extraordinary.
Yeah.
That is amazing. So, by understanding this, we now can come to a interesting point that discussions when we have liberty and freedom pulled apart are a lot more meaningful. They're a lot more productive, that people feel satisfied because if we discuss, well, what restrictions do you agree with? Now we
Mhm.
have a discussion about liberty, and a person could see the freedom in those restrictions. He can drive wherever he wants in America
Mhm.
with a driver's license as long as he follows the rules.
Correct.
And that's a
So,
little different than I'm just going to drive any wherever I want, however fast I
highway.
want, and
Mhm.
disregard all the rules.
Exactly. No, so I understand it makes sense, and so so in a way, liberty is better at quantifiably. I'm not sure how better than freedom because we have to have rules, and it's the same reason we put guardrails and streetlights up, right? Because it's meant to preserve life,
Right.
and you'll protect life and the sacredness of life when you have these rules. Understood?
Great. Now, do you think that your listeners would be able to see the difference now and satisfied? Like, is there a difference if they tuned in to
Yeah.
find out? Do you think
No,
they've
I think so. I think the words are just used interchangeably so much that people don't, spend time to actually think about it. But then if somebody asks, "Okay, well, why is that important?" What would you then say?
Well, I would say it's important because when liberty is differentiated or distinguished from freedom, then there's a greater degree of understanding. And then when they read the preamble, they have a whole new sense for that purpose.
Hmm.
Remember, the preamble has 6 purposes.
Yeah.
So when we come back to the purpose of anything, like let's take a lawnmower, if a person didn't understand the purpose of a lawnmower, but you're teaching him all about it, but he never really connected that it's going to be used to cut grass,
Yep.
we're in trouble. But if he had a purpose totally clear, he understands liberty as one of the words in the purpose, now he gets a result. And the reason it's important is really contained in the results that we get. So if it's okay with
Yeah.
you, I can read an example of a result, and that I think will answer the question of why is this important.
Yeah. Go ahead.
So this person says, I've been living in the US since 1988 and never wanted to become an American citizen. And suddenly, studying the preamble, I realized why that is, and that it has nothing to do with America. It has to do with what people have made out of America. So, another side effect of reading this is that I, for the first time, want to become an American. Not the shabby substitute that has been created, but the original idea that you are spreading and revitalizing.
Mm.
I must confess that while I had glanced at the Constitution a few times and even read parts of it, it never became real. America's success in becoming the most powerful and free nation on earth was started with the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. So,
Yeah.
with that being said, I would just like to encourage your listeners to get the guide and do the guide because it's just one sentence. But if you can imagine, and we can imagine hundreds of millions of Americans getting a complete understanding of this one sentence, I think would have accomplished a lot of results and have a point of harmony that people could relate to.
Yep. So is that ultimately the goal? Would you see that if people can agree on definitions and if people can understand that, look, we have to be a nation of laws and we have to have agreed restraints that will promote, tranquility and protect, life, is that then what you imagine would turn into a more, I guess, productive country where we're not at each other's throats all the time? Because it seems that, especially after this past year in 2024, America is so deeply divided on many things.
Yes. Well, in my view, that this is an immediate point to have a country come together on its original six purposes. And I would just like to say, just to wrap up, is that what we covered today is sort of like if you were going through a mall where there's restaurants and there's the lady with the tray of bits of chicken on a toothpick and he
Yeah.
gives you one sample of that chicken. That's like what we did today. And the entire meal is a lot more than just that one sample. So
Yeah.
I would just like you to know that I think all the listeners, if they did the guide, would find amazing results and benefits. Time and again, I've had people say, wow, I didn't know that before. And really knowing the six purposes gives the whole country something that we can harmonize on.
Yeah. So how does somebody then get the guide?
They can go to citizensacademy.us and they can download a free version of the guide. They can also buy a soft copy or a hard copy, which looks like this.
Got it.
And that is what I would strongly recommend everybody listening takes advantage of that. It's a free download. It's a beautifully illustrated. It's fun and enjoyable, but doing the guide is my mission. And I'm glad that we actually did part of it and followed the instructions so that people could see it really is something to do and exercise those mental muscles.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm all about education, just like you are. And on this channel, one thing we always try to do is give people, tips and on the law or conflict resolution. In a way, the supreme law of the land of the U.S. is the U.S. Constitution, and because of that, it very rarely have we actually ever gone right to that source, right, and discussed it. And so today was one opportunity, one chance we got to actually dabble into it and get mixed up into it. Because usually we're talking about statutes, we're talking about people's regular lives and how they deal with a co-parent in a conflict resolution situation. But all these things still need to be resolved by law if it has to go to court. But those laws still are governed ultimately by the U.S. Constitution. It's that one document that binds us all as Americans. And so, to me, I've always been intrigued by that document, and I've always said that it's the oldest. And tell me if I'm wrong, if you think I'm wrong, but I think it's the oldest continuing living instrument of government and alive in the world right now. I mean, still in existence in the world. It's been amended, sure, but I can't think of another, um, you know, uh, current existing government that is still using a document from 250 years ago. Because next year is the anniversary, the 250th anniversary. And again, historically, I can't think of one. I mean, Magna Carta's dead. We get principles from it, but I mean, anything in China, there's nothing that is as old and then has also become the foundation for so many other documents that other nations have copied their own constitution from the US Constitution. And so anyway, but what do you think about that? Is there another document that would rival it?
Not that I know of. What you said is exactly my understanding too. We're in harmony, and I believe what you described is exactly right.
Yeah. And so, as you know, I'm from another country myself. And so I think immigrants, when we come to the US and we become American citizens, we have a appreciation for the Constitution in many ways, in ways that many Americans who are native born don't have. I don't think, because people may take something for granted. They they have it, they're used to it, they kind of accept that it's there, but they don't understand that this document gives so much protection, and people who are from other places may not have had those same kind of protections. And it's something that I hope more Americans would actually go and look up, study, and read and learn.
I'm with you all the way. And my ideal is that every single immigrant would actually do the guide, go through every page of the guide, and get the full understanding that one can gain from it to get actually complete understanding of just one sentence, having hundreds of millions of Americans learning fully that one sentence is our mission and our goal.
Awesome. All right, so we're gonna leave it there. And thank you so much, Christopher Nesbitt of Citizens Academy US, for coming on and talking to us about this topic today. All right, everybody, lmipodcast.com. Check out the website, channel, Spotify. We're everywhere. And then we'll continue educating the public on this information. Okay. Stay right there,
Thank you.
Christopher.
Okay.